Well, I want to welcome everybody to the call today. If this is your first time, my name is Bryan McKenzie. I have the privilege to serve as the Director of Football with Fellowship of Christian Athletes in the Midwest region and beyond. And this is our 12th edition of the Heart of the Coach, where we have a guest coach come on and answer some questions to share his heart and hopefully encourage you and sharpen you as a coach as well. And it's my privilege to introduce our guest coach today, Jeff Grimes, my friend from BYU, is the offensive coordinator there. Jeff, welcome to the call today.
Thanks, Brian. Privileged to be here. Just appreciate you giving me the opportunity to spend some time with you today.
Well, glad you could. Well, Jeff, I know you're enjoying spending some time with your family. You shared with me where you are right now, but what is something you all have enjoyed doing as a family during this time of quarantine?
Probably more than anything, just sharing meals together. I know that sounds simple, but I have 4 kids. 3 teenagers and a 10-year-old. And for those of you that have kids that are that age, it's hard to share a meal together, much less multiple meals together in the course of a week or a day. And so for us to share 2 or 3 meals together every day has just been awesome, because there's no activities, there's no sports, there's no practices for them. I'm home all the time. And so we start every day by having breakfast together and share a devotional time together every morning, and that's been an awesome time for us to break bread together and then have that devotional in the morning and then end the day with dinner together. So as simple as that is, just sharing meals together has been awesome. And I think we've all talked about, or a lot of us have probably thought about, what can I take from this quarantine time to make me better? And for me, it's finding a way to make that happen on a more consistent basis. And hopefully we can do that. We can do that more regularly after we come out of this.
Yeah, hey, I completely agree with you. Some of the simple things that we don't get to do all the time, or we haven't fit that into our schedule, that are so special. And I pray that does. You got a helper there with your audio-visual situation.
Yeah, I'm hoping. Hey, you got to get somebody young and sharper than yourself.
Yeah,
like my daughter Bailey right there.
Thank you, Bailey. You helped all our coaches out. There you go.
That's right. Now I can see. All right.
Yeah. Now all the rest of the coaches on the call don't feel as silly about technology too. So, yeah. Well, Jeff, what's the greatest football game, or one of the greatest football games you've been a part of, and why was it so great?
I've been blessed to be a part of a lot. I've coached football at the high school level, the Division III level, Division I, and been a part of a lot of great games. Probably for me would be when I was coaching at Auburn, 2010. We had several games that year that were really, really tight games, and we were fortunate enough to win the national championship that year. But at Alabama, I don't know if any of y'all remember that game or not, but in Tuscaloosa, we were down 24-0 in the second quarter of that game. They jumped on us fast. I think at the end of the first quarter, they had like 311 yards or something, and we had maybe 15 total yards or something. It was the worst feeling I've ever had as a coach early in a game. And then we scored just before halftime and made it 24-7, and then came out in the second half, scored again, made it 24-14, and you could feel the momentum shift. And then we went on and won the game 28-24. But I think just because the remarkable turnaround at a place like that. And I've played Alabama a lot of times, and that's the only time I've beaten them, but maybe that's part of it. But just being down to a team like that in such significant circumstances, dire straits, and then finding a way to come back from that is something that I'll never forget.
Yeah, well, I do remember that game. What a great game. What a great season for you guys. It's probably a lot of great games that year. Well, Jeff, why do you coach? What's your why?
A couple things. I thought, number one, I love coaching. I mean, I love football. I love everything about it. I love watching films. I love game planning. I love practice. I love the strategy behind it. But ultimately, even more so than that, is the opportunity to rub up next to other men, the opportunity to be impacted by other men and have an impact on other men. And I thought of a story that illustrates both of these things based on that year. After that season, that 2010 season at Auburn, one of my players that was a senior had come back for his pro day, and he left a note in my office. And he said, "Coach, I want to thank you for everything. You're like the dad I never had. And without you, I wouldn't be who I am today." And as I read that, tears kind of formed up in my eyes, because this was a kid that meant a lot to me, and a kid that honestly had been through some hard times that he and I had shared together, had been in a little bit of trouble, but came through all that and was a great player and a wonderful young man, and was a significant part of that season for us. But as I read that, I looked over and I'm looking at the national championship ring sitting in my office, and I thought that note right there is infinitely more valuable than that ring is, because a few years from now, no one will know, no one will remember the national championship. No one will remember who won it in 2010, but hopefully that guy right there will be a good husband and father and man someday. And the fact that I had some small part in that is certainly more valuable than anything else. So those things are the things that mean the most to me, and right now I've been thinking about it a lot during this quarantine. I miss coaching football, and I'm still able to do some of that, Zoom meetings and watching film and all that kind of stuff. But I think what I miss more than anything is being with the coaches and players that I'm used to being with every day.
Yeah. Love it. Well, you mentioned just the desire to be around men that are pour into you, you pour into them. And so name a couple of those men, some of those coaches you've coached with, most influential coaches you've coached with, and why they had such an influence in your life.
Yeah, I've been really, really blessed all the way back to the time that I was a player. I was fortunate. I played football at UTEP in college, and Andy Reid was my offensive line coach for a couple of years, and just a tremendous man, a great coach, great family man, a man of faith, and just a great guy that had a huge impact on me at an early age. And at the time, I didn't even know I was going to coach. But as I look back on my coaching career, I think there were influences go all the way back to the time when he was coaching me, and I didn't even know it at the time. And then all the way through, I've been fortunate to work around a bunch of great guys. Before I came to BYU, I was coaching at LSU and worked for Ed Orgeron, and the energy and the passion for the game that he has is something that has impacted me as a coach. I watched him every single day show up to the office excited about what we were doing. And he told me once that Pete Carroll told him, treat every day like it's an official visit day. If you're a college coach, you know what it's like when you have official visits in on a weekend, and that's game time. It's a big day. He said, treat every day in the office like that. And he did. Every staff meeting, he was excited about it. When the players showed up for meetings, he's the first one to greet them with a high five or a chest bump. And the energy level that he brought to our program was something that had an impact on me. I coached at Virginia Tech just for one season, but it was with Frank Beamer before he retired. And wow, what a great man and a great coach. I watched the way that he trusted people, hired assistants, trusted them to do their jobs, and allowed them the freedom to do it, but still maintained the overall vision of the program, and still led by example himself every day before practice. And he was in charge of special teams and kind of made his name as a coach through special teams. Some of y'all probably remember Beamer Ball, but every day before practice, he would be out on the practice field himself coaching the scout punt team or the scout punt block, punt return team himself. The scout team, just so the punt team or the punt return team would get the looks right in practice that day. He coached it himself, not some grad assistant or some assistant coach. He coached those guys himself to get the looks right. He might be the first guy out on the practice field just to get that right. And the level of attention that he paid to the small things, even towards the end of his career, that was probably 2 or 3 years, 4 years maybe tops before he retired. But at that point in his career, still just the attention that he paid to the small things made a memorable impact on me. And then I've had countless others, but really, really blessed to work for a lot of good guys. The guy that I work for right now, Kalani Sataki, great man. And, one of the things I value most about him is the freedom that he allows us to spend with our families, which can be a challenge for all of us in coaching. And he really, really values our family time. And sometimes my biggest problem is him running me out of the office before I feel like we've got our game plan put together, because he'll say, go spend time with your families. But I'm certainly a product of my environment and been around a lot of great guys.
Yeah, that's great. And Jeff, I'm thankful you got those stories to tell, and it's a good situation for you. You can look back with fond memories, a lot of great coaches you've worked with and the impact they've had on your life. And obviously you're passing that on now to the guys you're with now, with the players and even coaches around you. Well, Jeff, you're not a member of the Mormon Church. Therefore, coaching at BYU puts you in a pretty unique situation. So how do you live out your relationship with Jesus, and how do you want that to impact your players?
It is a unique situation that I'm in, and I feel really blessed to be where I am, to be at a place where faith is valued, to be at a place where you can speak freely and are encouraged to speak freely about your faith, about Jesus and the impact that he makes on your life each day. And so I do that the way that I would anywhere. And it's been a real blessing to work with people who value their relationship with God in a similar fashion. And if we sat down and talked about theology, certainly you would find differences, but there are a lot more similarities. And one of those is a desire to have an impact on the guys that we coach. And, I think you do that just by living your life in front of these guys and not by trying to be somebody that you're not. I'm certainly not perfect. My players see me make mistakes all the time. I think being willing to allow them to see that and to fess up to your mistakes when you make one and say, hey, I screwed up today and I shouldn't have treated you that way, or I shouldn't have said that. To be around them with my family, to be intentional about that, having the players to my house, bringing them up to the office and to practice so they can see what that looks like. And then something that struck me a few years ago, and I can't remember how it did, but I just started thinking about how I could have a more intentional impact on my players. And so I put a picture of my players right next to me by my desk. And as I had my devotional time each morning, I would pick out one of those guys each day and started praying for him. And then a few years after that, one of the coaches I was working for would just text me or call me out of the blue and just tell me how he appreciated me. And I remember how much that meant to me, even as a grown man who was, 40, 45 years old at the time, what that meant to me. And so I said, why am I not doing that with my guys, with my players? Why am I not having that sort of intentionality in the way that I approach my relationship with them? And so now, not every day, but most days, I'll pick out one or two or three guys on our offense and shoot those guys a text and just let them know I'm praying for them that day. Maybe tell them something I appreciate about them, tell them how I'm praying for them, and try to be specific about it. I know when I get a text from somebody, and Bryan, you're one of these guys that does this for me, and you tell me how you're praying for me, that encourages me. And specificity means even more. And so I try to do that with a few guys, and sometimes it might be one of my staff, one of the guys that coaches with me. Sometimes it might be an entire position group. Sometimes it might just be one guy. And since I've begun doing that, I've felt a different level of connection with my players.
Yeah, I love it. I appreciate that. I know it's always good to hear practical things like that. We talk about wanting to impact our players for eternity, impacting with the gospel. When you give practical things and ways that we can build those relationships, when those opportunities come up, coaches can take those opportunities and point them beyond themselves. Well, Jeff, as a college coach, things are a little different right now, but normally during the season, especially, you're super busy, not just as a college coach, but as a coach. I mean, if you coach high school nowadays, you're putting in the hours that are just crazy, but any coach puts in a lot of hours. So during those times when you're super busy, the schedule's hectic, how do you, or what are you doing to practically foster your relationship with Jesus Christ?
For me, it starts with trying to have that morning devotional time, and I don't think there's anything special about morning. I think you can do it any time, and I don't think there's any formula as long as you make it a priority. For me, it works best in the morning because it helps me get my day started right. For me, if I spend that time in the morning in prayer and in the Word, then it gets my heart right before I ever start my day. And sometimes it doesn't take long for me to forget and have to be recentered. And so the next thing I would say is just being around other like-minded guys and trying to foster those relationships. When I've been on staff with other guys who have a similar approach to how they're going about coaching, then they challenge me, and they cause me to remember why I'm really doing it. For me personally, it's real easy for me to get sunk into game planning and film and practice scripts and all of that stuff and forget about the relationships, forget about making an impact that goes beyond what actually happens on the field. The fact that I'm trying to live in such a way that I make a difference beyond the scoreboard is something that's easy for me to forget. And so when I've had other guys that are like-minded on staff with me, it's helped me because they can get me recentered. And then honestly, I appreciate guys that I'm not working with. And I've been in situations sometimes where I didn't have as much of that. And so just being able to stay in touch with some of those guys, whether it be text or an occasional email or phone call, iron sharpens iron. I need that. And so the relationship that I have with other believing coaches is as big as anything for me.
Yeah, love that. Relationship with the Lord, so they've got the vertical and relationship horizontally with guys. So important for all of us. Well, Jeff, you've been coaching about 25 years now. And what's something you wish you would have known when you were a younger coach that you know now?
I think just the balance in life is something that can be a challenge for all of us as coaches. And I've had a couple times in my life when I was a younger coach, I had some older coaches talk to me about the balance and making sure that you don't neglect your own family for the guys that you coach. And that's always been a challenge for me. And I think I knew it early on, like I said, down deep somewhere, but I haven't always lived it out the way that I should. And so I think I would, if I was giving advice to a young guy getting started in this business, it would be to really make the commitment to live that out on a daily basis. And if that means that you don't have another hobby, you don't play golf as much, or one of the things I'm not always great at this, but I've tried to do, that means there are certain periods of the day where I need to set my phone away so that I'm not there, but not really there, as my wife says sometimes, and to not be distracted by some of those other things. And so my family feels like I'm really, truly there with them. I think I could do a better job of living that out. And so I think it's one of those things that can be a challenge for all of us, but certainly something that I would challenge a young coach with.
Yeah, great. Well, I'm going to throw out another football question here for you, Jeff, kind of a scenario. So this fall, November 28th, you'll be playing at Stanford, and you're going to be down by 5 with 3 seconds left, and you have the ball on their 10-yard line. So what play do you want to run, or what player do you want to get the ball to win the game? At Stanford, Down by 5, 3 seconds left in the game on their 10-yard line.
Yeah, that's a great question, a difficult one without having had the opportunity to prep for them. But I'll say that we've got some good players on our team. It'd be hard. I'd be hard pressed to pick one. However, the guy that I'm going to try to go to, if I've got one play left right now and I got to make a play, is Matt Bushman. He's a guy who can make that play and has done it repeatedly. And I think, all of us at times have to be reminded that that football is mainly about players, not plays. And certainly both matter, but in that situation, and you alluded to it with your question, you better get the ball to the guy that you trust to make the play first. And so even though we've got a number of talented guys on our team, and I think we could go a lot of ways with it, I'm going to get the ball to Matt.
All right. Yeah, a good friend of mine named Ken Leonard, who's a high school coach, all-time winningest coach in Illinois. He calls it the man offense, get the ball to the man. And you won't go wrong with that. Well, I'm going to ask you another question, then maybe open up for a couple questions with the guys on the call. But what's one of the biggest challenges you faced as a coach, and how did your relationship with Christ help you through that?
Well, they say there are two types of coaches, those who have been fired and those who are going to be fired. And I was fortunate for a lot of my career to be in the latter category, a guy who was going to be fired. But interestingly enough, the story I was telling you about earlier, when I was at Auburn, 2 years later, we got shown to the door. We went 3-9 and didn't win an SEC game in 2012. And so, in 2010, we were some of the smartest coaches in the country. And a couple years later, we were some of the dumbest coaches. And so that's how this business goes. And I saw about halfway through that season the way that I thought it might go. And certainly you continue to be optimistic, and you want to continue to prepare in such a way that you think you're going to win the rest of your games. But I felt like I needed to be honest with my family too. And so my wife is an awesome coach's wife, and I can't believe I've gotten this far into it without talking about her. But she was a college volleyball player and very active in church and FCA. We actually met through FCA when we were in college. Didn't go to the same school, but that's another story for another time. But I started talking to her that year about the fact that I thought we might not survive this. And her first thought was, no way. And I said, no, this is how this business goes. And so, if we don't turn it around pretty quickly, there's a good chance that we'll be fired and be looking for a job. And so we started talking about what that might look like for our family. And I said, I think we need to share this with the kids. My kids were pretty young at the time. And so Sherry's first inclination was to protect them and to say that, let's don't talk to them about it unless it actually happens. And I thought about it and prayed about it a little bit more. And I said, no, we're growing, meaning Sherry and our faith is growing during this time. And it really was. It was one of that season was one of the times in my adult life that I felt closest to God, that I felt like my faith was growing in a way that it hadn't really. And so I said, God's showing us so much right now, and we're growing through this. I think it would be neglectful as a parent to not give them the same opportunity. And so we started talking to them about the fact that this might happen, and gave them the chance to grow through it as well. And surely enough, at the end of the season, we did all get fired and went for a couple of months without a job. And it was really a great time with my family. But I went a couple of months not only without a job, but without any prospect of a job, without a phone call, without anything. And so that whole time, that season, and then the couple of months afterward, was really a time of great growth for me, where I had to step back and say, okay, my expertise as a coach, my work ethic as a man, and my resume means nothing right now. What means something is my faith, and living that out on a daily basis for my wife and my kids, because someday one of my boys might be in this situation. He loses his job, or my daughter might be in a situation where her husband loses his job, and I want her to be able to say, you know what, this happened when I was a kid, and I remember it, and here's how my daddy handled it. He believed that God was going to take care of us and that everything was going to be okay. And I'm sure I didn't always do that, but I do have to say that my faith is what saw me through that time, and I wouldn't be surprised if it happens to me again in this profession, and it'll be God that'll see me through it, not my resume and not my knowledge as a coach.
Yeah, I love it. You were living out James chapter 1 verses 2 through 4. Consider it all joy when you encounter various trials, knowing that testing your faith produces endurance, and that's what was doing. It's so good to hear. Let's open up for a question. Anybody have a question out there? And you coaches, just unmute yourself and ask Jeff a question.
Hey, Coach.
Hey, buddy, I got you.
Just a quick one, Coach. I'm only in the game about 2 years. I'm a quarterbacks coach, and at the moment, it's been a real struggle between kind of my football, my family, my faith. My family, my faith, kind of want me to go in one direction, and I kind of want to go higher in the football coaching chart. Start off as a quarterbacks coach. Would like to someday be a head coach here in Northern Ireland somewhere. Have you any advice on best way to deal with football and family and faith, the three combined, and what's the best way to go about things as a young coach moving forward?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really tough question for all of us. And for me, and I can't speak to your exact situation, Adrian, but for me, I can tell you what worked. Early in my career, I felt this constant tension, where it was just pulling apart with my career and football on one side and my family the other way. And it was strange for me because I felt like God was in this coaching thing for me. I felt like I was doing something that I was supposed to be doing. I feel like it's a calling for me. But I also felt the tension of not being the husband and the father that I felt like I should be. And I felt like God was possibly in the middle of both of them. I considered walking away from coaching, particularly college coaching at the time, and prayed about it and just didn't feel right about that. And so I stuck with it a little bit longer. And then what I came to find out after a little bit more time, and it was a blessing for me that I worked for a guy in that next situation where I had the chance to really spend time with my family. He valued family time, and I think that's a part of it. You have to choose as a head coach to make family a priority, or you got to hope that you can work for a guy who values your family time. But what I found is when I quit trying to pull against each other and I learned how to blend those two things together, it worked better for me. So having my family involved with my job helped me more. And I know you can't always do that, but having my boys come in the locker room with me, or if I had a recruiting trip and I was going to be gone for a day, taking one of my kids with me on that trip, even if they miss school for a day. So what? The chance for me and one of my kids, even my daughter's done that with them as well, and just pick one of them and spend a day with them that way. Having them at the office with me as much as they can be there, even if it's just coming to hang out and do homework after school in my office for an afternoon. Or I remember when my oldest boy was really little, he was probably 3 or 4 years old, and at the time I worked at a place where we didn't spend any time working on Sundays, but we had to have our film graded. And so when we showed up at 6 a.m. Monday morning, and so I'd wake him up early in the morning, Sunday morning. We'd get up at 6. I'd wake him up, take him with me. We'd stop at Krispy Kreme and get a donut on the way into the office. We'd get to the office, and I'd set him up on a machine where he could watch a Disney movie, and I would sit there and grade the film. This is before I could bring it home, but we'd sit there and grade the film, and then we'd leave the office, and then on our way out, he'd run through the blaster a couple of times and have good ball security, teach him that on our way out the door. And then we'd go and meet the rest of my family at church. And having the players over to my house to come and hang out and have dinner, the blending of those two things is what has worked for me. And, you know, some guys talk about not bringing your work home. I think there's certainly time for that and value for that. For me, it's been the opposite. Bringing my work home has allowed my family to understand what I'm doing a little bit more, and for us to kind of do life together. And my wife wants to know what's going on at work. Sometimes she wants to know more than what I even want to give. And so the blending of football and family is what has made it work for me. And then us being able to do ministry together and hopefully have impact on our staff and players, I think ultimately makes it all work together, and hopefully does it in a way that God is pleased with what we're doing.
Awesome.
Great,
Awesome.
yeah, great question. Great question, Adrian. And we're gonna have to end with that question, just to keep within our time here. We promised everyone, but so Jeff, thanks again for being on our call. Really appreciate it, brother. Really appreciate your wisdom, your authenticity to every coach here.
Hey, my pleasure, and I've been blessed by a lot of guys in my life, and so if I can do anything to share from those experiences, I'm more than happy to do it. Appreciate you, Bryan, and what you do for FCA and what you do for us as coaches and for the Lord. Thanks, man.
Appreciate that. Well, just want to quickly let you guys know that next Tuesday our lineup has Van Malone on Tuesday, passing game coordinator and assistant head coach at Kansas State. Next Wednesday is Jason Washington, who's a safeties coach at Mississippi State. And then next Friday, the head coach of Murray State University, Dean Hood, will be our guest. So hope you guys can join us for that. I'll be sending things out. But before we go, let me pray for Jeff and pray for all you guys on this call. Lord, thanks for our time. Lord, thank you for Jeff. Thank you for your call in his life, first of all, as a follower of Jesus, and then as a husband and father, and then as a football coach. Lord, thank you how you've enabled him to blend those together to make maximum impact and honor Jesus through it all. So Lord, we pray you continue blessing on him, his family, bless their time together right now. Bless his relationship with his fellow coaches and his players. Lord, we pray you be glorified in and through it. And Lord, use all of us in the profession of coaching to make an eternal impact, that you might be glorified. In Jesus' name, amen. Thanks again, Jeff. Everybody have a great day.